Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Monday's Wealth Creation Show. This is part 5 of the Diary of a Property Investor with Jim. This is going to be a good one this week, Jim. As we said last week before we finished off, we're going to speak about figures and your journey on building your property empire, which I'm sure everybody will be really interested about.
Well, absolutely are.
Yep. We're just we're a wee bit delayed this one.
I'm trying to sign into Instagram.
Yeah, so as we left off last week, Jim, we'd been following your journey as you went through your career and obviously how you progressed in that and mentors and things, and then obviously using property or starting to look at property as like a bit of a side hustle, as you referred it to, in addition to your obviously 9-to-5 job. And this week we're going to really hone in on how you developed that and look at how the figures and things worked and how that began to build, like I say, your property empire and eventually obviously got you to where you are today. And the people that helped you along the way is very important, and who the important people that you drew from and what you drew from them and how you used that and implemented it into your own day-to-day things and obviously helped you be successful ultimately.
Yeah, definitely. I had good contractors in the beginning. Actually, now you say that, I'm just actually trying to get onto live on Instagram. Here we go. I had really good contractors in the beginning. Mark Taylor was the guy that actually I used to work with all the time. And Mark is no longer here. Mark just, unfortunately, he committed suicide. But that's another story. And it really took. That's actually a journey I actually need to get over as well. It took me a lot of years to get over that and what happened, because we started together both at the same time. He started his building business and I started my buy-to-let business, and we both just worked forever. We just burnt the candle at both ends in the middle. Maybe that's what did it ultimately overall for Mark. Possibly that's maybe what did it for Mark, and that's what pushed him over the line, was the very fact that it was too difficult for him to take, if that makes sense. I think that's where we were at that point in time. I'm just setting this up. Okay. So everybody can see me on Instagram. We're live on Instagram, live on TikTok. Thank God for that. So the need to get a really good contractor in the beginning was essential for me on my journey. So that's where I was at the beginning. Now, how I first started off and how I first bought my first property was a bit of, it took time for me to do this. And the reason it took time was because I've said before, I was really nervous. It was like, how could this be so easy to make money like this? This was the early 90s. How could this be so easy? Surely everybody, why is nobody else doing this? And really, I had to get my mind round that. Why no one else is doing it? Why is nobody else doing this? This seems so easy to do this. But what I found out was the hurdles I started coming up against was getting the finance, getting somebody to agree, because people didn't know what buy-to-let was at that time. Banks didn't know what that was either. And the only way I was ever going to do anything with it was actually to convince a bank or some person to loan me money in order to do this. I mean, I had a bit of money myself in the beginning, which was used what was loans and endowment policies, investments, endowments, as security. So, example, the investments and endowments I had were unencumbered. In other words, they weren't attached to anything anymore because they were from old properties I had before that I'd now sold, but I had them and I was on capital repayment mortgages, so I didn't need the endowment plans to pay off that mortgage anymore because it was on capital repayment for my own properties. So I had about, I can't remember if it was 10 or 12,000 at the time, and it was guaranteed to pay that out. So I was able to then go to the bank and say, rather than actually me cash this in, would you give me this as security against giving me 100% funding as a bank? And at that time, they were like, happy days. Yeah. This makes absolute sense, because we've got a guaranteed deposit now, more or less. So I was making money on the investment plans, plus I was actually making money on the property when I got the mortgage on it. So I was making both, but it took me a wee bit of time to do it. You were going to ask me a question there.
No, I was just going to say, just to clarify for people, I mean, people the same age as me or slightly younger who were young in the early 90s and things, or maybe people that are just unfamiliar,
Just rub it in.
the concept of like buy-to-let mortgages and things, where that just didn't exist. That wasn't a thing then.
Buy-to-let mortgage is only about 25 years old.
Yeah.
So when we go back 25 years ago, we're almost at the end of the 90s, coming into the 2000s, when buy-to-let mortgages started to appear. So I did this probably about 5 years before that.
Yeah.
So, you know, every single bank was like, it was really like Little Britain, where the computer says no. When you went to a bank and said, you know, can I get lending for this? Because this makes absolute sense. They would just go, no. It's like, we don't do that type of product. We've never heard of that thing in our life. We don't have customers that do things like that. So why would we do it? It took me a lot of it. Now, as one door closes, this is the key here. You know, a window opens or another door opens, and you just keep asking and asking and asking and asking. And at some point, somebody actually pointed me out to a bank manager who went, that makes absolute sense, Jim. You actually buy a property and rent it for £300 a month, and the mortgage effectively costs you £126 a month. But we have to do a capital repayment for you. That's what they said. We have to do a capital repayment for you, and in terms of what these numbers meant to us, because they would only ever do term loans. There was no such thing as an interest-only loan on a buy-to-let mortgage, so it was capital repayment. So it was actually, I mean, funny enough, how do I remember that? When I bought my first property, it was £126 a month for the mortgage, but I was renting it for, I think it was £60 a week, which I was £240, which effectively was 200 in a month. It was £260, because £60 a week is 240, but that's not a month, that's 4 weeks. So you have to multiply the £60 a week by 52 and divide it by 12, and you get 260 a month. So 260 a month, 126 for the mortgage.
Yep.
Good margin in between, almost double the amount. So, you know, it made sense actually to do that. But
do you think? Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
I was going to say, do you think that you remember that so vividly because you maybe knew that it was the start of something that was going to be a lot bigger, or you knew it was going to be? Do you know what I mean? So it was quite poignant in your mind to remember those figures exactly.
Possibly, but I get completely obsessed with figures and numbers.
I know you
do.
So
it's not surprising. You'll know yourself that I have this kind of photographic memory because I've memorized things so much and I go over it so much in my mind to get the journey planned before I start, to get the destination planned before I actually start the journey. So I've often said I'll know the result before I actually start. And I've obviously, I'm in my mind, I'm de-risking everything. Now, remember at that time as well, as I had quite a good amount of knowledge in terms of finance because I was training to become an accountant, and I was an accountant, a trainee accountant at that time. So numbers and finance made absolute sense to me, and I had been through all that process. So getting your numbers right and get your finance right is the most important thing, because that's where it all starts from. If you can't see you making a profit on it, there's no point in doing it, because why else are you in business? Yeah, and this is what our society doesn't understand. People often frown in this country on entrepreneurs out there making a profit, and it's like, I was always taught in accountancy, you have to make a profit to reinvest back in the business. Yeah. If you're not making a profit, then when you come to do repairs and improvements or anything like that, or you have voids, or you still have to pay someone, if you're not making a profit, you're out of business.
Yeah.
So profit isn't a bad word. Profit is necessary in our society in order to actually, in order to reinvest in your business. That's all I was ever told in accountancy. Fair enough, you could pay yourself something, but you need it to reinvest in. So my journey in the beginning, Richard, started with almost about 3 or 4 years of preparation and understanding how things worked. But as I said before, the failed businesses that I'd actually gone through and the business plans I'd gone through before had actually put me in good stead and good practice in order to understand where I should be going and how I should be doing it. So there was a lot of modelling, financial modelling, on a smaller scale, not huge spreadsheets or anything, in terms of in my mind and on paper and in spreadsheets, to understand exactly where the result was going to end up and where I was going to be. And that was literally just, I was taking how much rent I've got coming in, I was taking how much mortgage I've got paid to pay, and then I was working out there how much cash flow I've got at the end of it. And then I was working out, again, in my mind, I was working out, okay, so if I didn't have it occupied for a certain amount of time in the years, it wasn't as sophisticated as today. on my spreadsheet, but it was just it was still that bare basic bones.
A simpler model of what you do.
Yeah, a simple model saying if I've got 300 and if I've got 260 coming in, I've got 126 to pay. I'm managing myself, so I've got 140 almost, or just over that to actually use. Now, when you put that in the context, £140 doesn't sound like a lot, but at that time, it's a lot of money.
Yeah, and that compounding up as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's look at the spreadsheet, and I'll get that up. Actually, you talk amongst yourselves. And
the thing with the spreadsheet now, Jim, and it's really good, and obviously we share it with our investors and landlords and things, and them the ones that are maybe continuing their journey and adding to their portfolio or completely starting out new, really find it so helpful to, like you say, stress test and do your risk analysis, whether it's going to be vacant, if it's going to be vacant for a couple of months, or if interest rates go up, and it's really good to play around with the figures, especially when you're at that stage of the initial purchase. And there's a investor that I'm dealing with just now, and he's got his figures and they work, and I'm saying stick to them. Don't let the agent that you're buying from or the seller push you in a different direction or push you up. If it's going to make your numbers not work, just move on to the next one. And it's so important to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't let your emotions come over and overpay for a property because you really want it. If the numbers don't work, then it's not a good investment, and that's where you need to obviously have that balance in your brain. Like, this is my emotions are taking over the actual figures here.
The numbers don't work, so why would you be doing it? That for me is everything. If the numbers don't work, then don't be emotionally involved in it, and don't actually jump into it just because you feel like, oh, I've got to get started. I mean, you can see the spreadsheet here, can't you?
Yeah, I can see that clear.
Yeah, unfortunately, people on Instagram and TikTok, you can't see it. But if you do want to see the spreadsheet, it will be on YouTube channel. So 5 Properties TV, and it'll be live streaming on there right now as we speak, and you'll be able to see this. You'll also be able to see Richard, because Richard's not got enough followers yet. We can't actually, we can't invite him onto Instagram.
I'm at 734, I think, on it.
Yeah. So if you get a chance, go on to Richard Cook and actually follow him on TikTok. Get him up to 1,000 followers so we can get him on live on the TikTok channel as well. So you can see that on here. So I'll shock you. I did a lot of practicing in the beginning, right? Okay.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is I did a lot of research. In other words, I put an advert in the paper at that time, and I said basically a 1-bedroom flat in Aberhill. Furnished, unfurnished, DSS welcome or considered, phone this number. And it rang off the hook. And I knew straight away then I was going to get a rental for this. So that was my wee test bed. Nowadays, you can see most people, if you go to an agent now, at that time there was no agent really to look after things. There was none of the infrastructure it is in now. The buy-to-let market was only about 8% of the UK property market. So it was very, very in its infancy, as it had been run down over the years by successive governments, discouraging people to actually be in buy-to-let, because social housing was there in the 1980s and that took over. But as social housing declined, the number of social houses, therefore buy-to-let started to take off because there was demand for rental property. So when I put an advert in the paper, I knew straight away that the demand was there. That was my test. But nowadays you can easily find out from a letting agent the demand's there for your type of property. But that's what I did. So I knew, and that's when I went to the bank and gave them the numbers, it made absolute sense. So my purchase price for the property was £15,102. Yep, that was my purchase price for a 1-bedroom flat in Taylor Street in Methil. And you probably get it for that price today.
Not quite.
Jokingly. And they came along and he says, I tell you what, I'll give you 100% funding, because I had these deposits. So he gave me 100% funding. And I remember at that time, it was something like 6% for it. And I was renting it for $260 in terms of that. So 6% of that, and I better put 1% there, so I get the other 14,000 in there. So see how the mortgage is. The interest is only £75.73 a month in there. See that? But it was £126 because I had to start paying off the capital repayment. But if you look at it purely on a financial model for interest only, because that's how you should look at it. You should always look at the interest payment. You shouldn't look at the capital repayment. I mean, you can only look at that when you come to cash flow, but profit-wise, it makes absolute sense. So when I looked at the interest payment, you're paying £75. It was a 6% mortgage rate. Arrangement fee, I didn't think I think actually I got away with arrangement fees at that time. There was no arrangement fees because they didn't really bother. They were quite open to letting me do term loans, and fine, we don't really need the loan because it's inconsequential at that time. They were only, I suppose they were testing it as well at the same time as I was testing this sort of market. So you can see there, look at the £185 cash flow every month.
Yeah.
The profit actually, not cash, remember, because this is not a capital repayment. There is a capital repayment, but if it was profit and it was purely interest only, it would be 185 a month. But look at the gross yield.
Yeah, 20.7.
Aye, 20%. Look at the leverage. 1,451%. We're using the bank's money. And the overheads are at 30% again, because that's it assumed. But my return on investment, and at that time, improvements in that, actually the improvements were factored into there, by the way, because I did a lot of it myself. So you'd be lucky if it's £1,000. So you can see there, my initial return on investment every single year was 111%. That's a good return, eh?
That is, yeah.
I've still got that property today, by the way.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, 176.
Yeah.
And what I did was I actually sold it. I sold it to my limited company for $20,000 in February 2004. And now my limited company actually has it. And the mortgage for my limited company is probably less than that now. It is actually round about that level right now, because it's base plus 2.79 I've got. So it's round about that level now. So that return on investment is still there. I never ever took profits out of there, really. Fair enough, I've remortgaged it to invest, because the valuation of that property now, I mean, what is a one-bedroom flat in Taylor Street now? Probably around about 50 grand.
Yeah, about 45.
Condition. You'll get about 50 grand for one of these properties now. So I sold it for 20 grand at that time in 2004. So my lesson in there learned it is actually open. It is actually open to negotiation with the banks about how you do things at that time. But look at how many years I've had this. If I type in, it was 1997 I actually bought this one. So 97. So that's 25 years. So I put 25 years in there, 2% every year appreciation in property. So my return on investment over the 25 years is 3,451%. That's a good return, eh?
That's not bad.
Aye. Now, I've only put 1% in there, but really, to be honest, Richard, it's an infinite return, because I don't have any money in that deal any money in that property anymore.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say deal. I do not want to say deal, because it sounds so much like the charlatans out there that talk about deals and multiple income streams and all the rest of it. And I can't stand that language. It just doesn't resonate with me at all. So that's where we are right now with that. Now, what lessons have I learned from 176 Taylor Street? Right. My first tenant actually was Derek. I still know Derek today. And Derek was a great guy. All I did was I laid the carpet myself. I painted and decorated the property myself. I tidied up the kitchen because there was nothing wrong with it, really. It could still be used. It was single glazed at the time, so it was still fine. There were all the wood, all the timber and all the rest of it, and the windows were perfect as well. And the shower room was fine as well. I really didn't have anything else to do with it. That's how I looked at it in the beginning. As long as the house was clean and tidy, wind and watertight, and the heating system was adequate and everything else like that, people would want to rent because there was a demand for it. So that's probably the lesson I learned from it. Also, the other lesson I learned from it is never chop down the tree that bears the fruit. Look at that return. Infinite, if not 3,451%. And I've still got that property today after all these years. Yep. And the rental on that now is, what is it on it now, Richard?
375, I think we're doing that one.
375. And that's what I'm getting just now.
Yeah.
That is a 5,549% return. Infinite return again, to be honest. But you can see that 196% every annum I would make on that. If I had that now. Because the mortgage has never really changed. If anything, it's gone up to 20 grand. So we'll change the purchase price to 20,000. because that's when I bought it in a limited company. The interest rate's still the same, and we'll still take the same leverage. So I'm at 163%. Now, this actually really. What about all the people out there that say you're talking rubbish when you tell me you get 15% plus on your return? I get that all the time from people.
Yeah.
You tell me you get 50%. You never get 15%. You're absolutely right. I don't get 15%. I get 163% return every single year on my buy-to-let property, on this one particular. Every single year, 163% return on my money, if not infinite.
Now, do you think that's because, I mean, do you think that's because of the length of time that you've had the property and or the circumstances, how you obtained the property and like the figures at the beginning? Or, I mean, how do you think that is, Jim?
Yeah, I don't know. Let's give the benefit of the doubt and say, I've had it remortgaged, okay? I think it came in at 50 grand, so I'll put the purchase price at 50 grand, okay? And then we'll do it again. So even though you're around about a 12% return on investment now. But it's infinite again, Richard, because that 1% I've got as a deposit, actually, there is no deposit. But my numbers won't work. As I do 0.01,
unless you
to do that, a fiver, there you go. So it's a 15% return.
Yeah.
If I leave £5 in the deposit out, the 50 grand I've mortgaged it on. So basically, that's what the bank's done with me. But they actually did a 65% loan to value. I'm talking rubbish here. So they only did a 60% loan to value, sorry. So I'd say 40% down. So I'm now at 30. So 375, 6.4% return. But remember, as I said before, I've not really got anything at all.
You've not got anything in it.
No, it's an infinite return, but that's in today's money if I would use it for something else. I hope that makes sense for people out there in terms of where we are right now. But as I said before, when I go back to saying, a lot of people out there and investors go, there's no way you're making 15% plus on your property. Yes, I'm making a lot more than that. And it's probably the mortgage debt destruction. In other words, inflation. So the mortgage always stays the same. Plus the fact I never chopped down the tree that bears the fruit. Plus the fact is I made sure the occupancy rate was always high. The property was always refurbished. Over the years, I got access to grants. Local authority decided we're going to give you grants. If you're putting double glazing in, we're going to give you grants towards it. Marched effort. You put 5,000 in, we'll put 5,000 in, happy days. So as soon as I saw these sort of schemes, I was in there straight away like a rat up a drain pipe. And I was like, I'm prepared to reinvest in my property, to put UPVC doors on, prepared to put a new heating system in. I'm prepared to put a new windows in and take advantage of these grants available at the time. I was never shy on investment. That's probably one of the most important things I learned from 176.
Yeah,
and also things like, the other ones I started to, we'll leave it at that 176 because there's other lessons I learned from the other ones, which 176 probably told me as well, but I kind of ignored them at the time.
I think the important thing that you say there as well is, and you mentioned it, obviously, the cash flow is obviously used for reinvestment, and reinvestment includes obviously upgrading the properties and things, which isn't just beneficial to you. It's also to the tenant and their well-being and things as well, and that all goes hand in hand with having successful buy-to-let portfolio.
The most important thing I've learned on all my training before then and the mentorship I had from the people from the network marketing business and all the books I've read before then was feed the baby.
Yeah.
The baby is your business. It is the first person to get fed with money. You're not important. It's the baby that's important because the baby will ultimately set you free. So keep feeding the baby and letting it grow up over a period of time, over the years, and the baby will grow in and it'll grow up and it'll grow up to then provide for you as well. It's like a small sapling tree. As it starts in the beginning, you water it, you nurture it, the farmer mentality, you let it grow, and at some point in time, it gives you the oranges, it gives you the apples, it gives you the pears, and you reap the harvest. But the great thing is, if you've still got it, you reap the harvest the next year as well. You reap the harvest the next year as well, and the next year, and the next year, and the next year. And it's like, wow, that is just one property. It does all that. Think about that. Look at the amount. When you look at that number and you look at that one property, I can't labour that enough. Over the years, when you look at 25 years worth of rent, and we take an average, we have 260, 375, let's go in the middle there somewhere. So add another 50 quid on. So take an average of 310. So over the 25 years, the amount of rent that's come in is 3720 times 25. So if you take that and multiply that by 25, you're literally talking £93,000 in rent for a property I bought for £15,000.
Yeah, you look at that over the long term, that makes sense.
6 times cover. 6 times the rent actually covered the price of that property. That is leverage. That is wealth creation. And then all you're doing is you're going to a financer or a bank to help you purchase that property. Then you're factoring in things like your overheads from there, which you know what it's going to be, because you know it's insurance, you know there's repairs and improvements, you know there's going to be a management company. That's about it, really. There's nothing else that's really involved in this. It's set to that. And if you can keep these things under control and keep them managed at the right levels, then you know what the number is going to be at the end of the year, every single time. So that 375 that's your local housing allowance rent, by the way. In other words, that's what the government will pay towards the one-bedroom flat. So that's why 375 is a tolerable rent level. So we're not charging extortionate amounts in comparison to what everybody else is and what the Scottish government says. We're charging what the government themselves recommend. We're charging their rates. So if anything like a rent cap comes in or a rent freeze comes in, it's like, okay, we're all right, because we're charging the normal rent anyway of what they're expecting in between their calculation of what they call the 30% quartile. So the 30% quartile, and this is another one that I actually understood from this and learned over the years, was it's the amount of rent it's charged in the private sector. In other words, they're not government assisted rents. They then take that and then work out the average for the area with the rent assessor. He works the average for the area and then takes 30% of that average, and that is the going rent rate for the local authority housing, for local authority private rents, for what they would assist with the government. A 30% quartile, that's what it's called. So that's why it's important to understand how the system works in order to make sure your returns are actually right and they're within tolerance of everything else. I could easily go to the market. We could do a private rent on this rather than a DSS rent or a government-assisted rent of maybe about 400, Richard, possibly.
We could get 400 for a one-bedroom.
Yeah, but I'm not particularly bothered. It's like, okay, I'm quite happy to have that rent level because the numbers still work for me, because I've managed to manage my money over the years and I've not gone crazy. And when I've actually remortgaged the property, all I've done is reinvested the money back into buying more property over a period of time, or repairs and improvements, which actually improved the price of the property as well. I've never really taken anything out of this, because all I've done is, again, I come back to saying, I've actually just survived on my income from working full time in industry. And I've actually invested part of my income in industry, and then what we've got left is left to spend. It's amazing to think that I only started off with 23,000.
It is. And today's money, when you think of that, it's like, God, how did you build for that?
I looked at the account, it's like our initial capital, what we had to start on, was 23,000. And that's all it's ever been.
Yeah.
I've turned 23,000. Well, we know our journey is my first million. I've turned 23,000 way beyond that into where it is today. And that's only out of understanding how the system works and understanding how to work the numbers, and actually not getting carried away and going, I tell you what, I'm going to buy a Lamborghini. I'm going to buy a BMW. I'm going to buy a brand new car. I'm going to have this luxury holiday because I deserve it. That is the biggest one ever. That is the biggest destruction to your wealth. It's when you say to yourself, I deserve it. Or somebody else says to you, you deserve it. Oh, go on. You just deserve it.
You work hard, you deserve it.
Yeah. Don't tell yourself that, please.
No.
Because that's the wealth destruction. That's what will kill your wealth. If you start saying to yourself, I deserve it, I deserve it. Oh, God, I deserve it.
We're not saying don't tell yourself that you work hard, but don't reward yourself by spending all your hard-earned money.
Don't get carried away. Here's me. When I come to reward myself, this is what I learned from 176. When you come to reward yourself, right? Think to yourself, I quite fancy buying a car. And you think to yourself, what's a car going to cost? 15,000. Ooh, I could buy that for cash. Or I could put deposits on another 3 properties at that level.
Yeah.
And the 3 properties will generate that type of income. And the car payment would be less than that. So that would actually pay for you to rent the car or lease the car at that time or buy it on credit. And that's kind of how I thought. But then I thought to myself, I didn't really need to buy the car. I'll just soldier on with the one I've got there now, because then I'm not committed to another finance agreement. But it's actually not making me money. So that's what I've learned in the beginning from 176 when I first started. Now, any questions so far, Richard?
No, that's fine. I mean, a lot of it makes sense to me. And I was just going to say to people that are listening that maybe the figures or how we were speaking about, obviously, how like the mortgage things works out. If it doesn't make sense, please message us, ask us. Just quickly before we move on to the next bit, Dave says working out the destination result and work backwards to the current position in any plan is key component of every success. Trying to move forward from the current situation without the pathway to destination tends to build experience of what not works. The UK needs a cultural and educational shift that success is obtained. It's very true, Dave, and thanks for your input. Please jump in the comments, anybody, if there's things that you want to add or ask.
Dave hits the nail on the head when he talks about that. Our primary schools and secondary schools should be taught that wealth creation and making profit is a good thing. And because it's the most important thing ever out there, because unless you have children that grow up into adults and actually have that mentality, you will never create any wealth in your economy. You will never have anybody to do that. We can't all be on the same amount of money. It just doesn't work like that. It's a great idea, and I love it because I'm a Trekkie fan, and I love the very fact that Gene Roddenberry came up with the principle that everybody works and does what they can in society for the betterment of society, and it doesn't matter what everybody has as long as everybody's fed, watered, and has a roof over their head. And I love that idea, that utopian idea Gene Roddenberry had. However, it's difficult to obtain because there's people out there that have a completely different view of the world, and they will try their best to destroy that way. And that's why you have communities come together and they just go, we're going to leave the world behind and we're just going to have our wee kibbutz and grow our vegetables and plants and just live in a society. And we're not interested in the world anymore. We'll just have our society for ourselves, where everybody will look after everybody else and everybody will nurture everybody else and everybody will work for the betterment of each other. Now, that is the ultimate goal in society, I would say, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But in this kind of society we have today, you have to generate money because money is right there up there with oxygen, and it's required for everything to help everybody in. Try paying your food bills with smiles. Try paying your mortgage with happiness. That ain't going to work. That's how the world works, and we've got it whether we like it or not. And you have to accept the things you can, but change the things you can, but accept the things you can't. That's it. We have a society that runs on money to do anything and look after people and actually provide for people, and that's what we need to do it. But my obligation is, and I've always said this, if you can, you must. So if you have the capacity to earn money because you're really good and you've got a skill at something, and you must go out and do that.
Yeah.
If you've not got a specific goal about why you'd want to do that, then I tell you what, go and generate the money and give it to somebody that needs it. Just because you can do it. Go and generate it and give it to somebody that needs it. Give it to a cause that needs it. Give it to a charity that needs it. But just go out and generate the money because you can. Don't go through life just sitting, doing nothing. You know, this thing about sitting on a beach, drinking pina coladas while the world goes by for the rest of your life is a great idea. But I tell you what, it's pretty boring when you've got nobody else round about you.
Yeah.
So it's the old thing about if you can, you must. I think that's the most important thing. So I like to see other people succeed, but I like to bring people on the journey because it's lonely. And that's what I was always taught by the people, my mentors before. It's like, it's all very well getting to the top, only to realise when
you get there, you're on your own.
You're the only person there.
Yeah.
It's like, great. It's like, hey, let's celebrate. It's like, where is everybody? That's no good. So it's about bringing people with you and sharing in that success, and then educating people that to help other people on their travels as well. And that's the kind of society I would love to see overall. And that's why I think like that, and that's why I do that over the years. People think I do it for Five Properties. It's like, no, Five Properties is just a vehicle for me to give back to the community. That's it. And it's great that everybody actually spends money or invests money in us selling their house, because then that allows me to do that. The day everybody stops doing that is the day I can't contribute towards the community, because that's the vehicle I used to do it. As well as, Richard, the things that I do with Parker Housing and the foundation that with Parker Housing is separate to Five Properties. It's my thing is about animals and cats and stuff like that. So I've been doing that lately throughout Jamaica and throughout Spain, in terms of catch and release programs. And that's the beginning of what I want to do with Parker Housing and Parker Housing Foundations, which I do, and actually helping people as well on their journey and education throughout the process. And possibly now and again, yourself, it's like, I don't force people to pay rent sometimes. Hopefully people keep paying their rent, but it's, when needs must, you have to help someone out. That's probably it.
Just to touch on, obviously you speak about money and things there, and a lot of people are like, oh, money can't buy you happiness. It could do a lot of good though. And I think
try it. Have you tried it lately? Because I tell you what, it goes a long way to doing it.
Yeah. And there's a lot of good that can be done if you've got money and do the right things with it. And I think also you referred to money being right up there with oxygen, and people might disagree with that, but then look at the current situation we're in just now. People that don't have a lot of money, they're deciding between food and heat, and do you know what I mean? That's life or death situations there, and money could solve that. So
look at the difference it makes when you walk into a food bank. You say, "There's £1,000," just like that, and another food bank, there's £1,000 just like that. That's what money can do for someone else. That's the whole reason, as far as I'm concerned, money is there to betterment other people's lives, and in return, it's the whole thing about. I'm sure it's in the Bible. It says, "Cast thy bread upon the waters, and it'll come back tenfold," or something like that. And it's that 10x is give. Yeah, you'll get something back. Give. Yeah, you'll get something back. But by only giving can you receive. If you're not a giver, you will not receive anything in your life at all. People will gravitate away from you, and people will not want to help you either. And you have to be a giver in life. And I know that's a difficult one for other people, because I see there's a lot of social media comments. It's like, "Oh, I've given everybody all my life, and all they do is take from me." Okay, but that will happen. You just got to give as much as you can, and at some point you will be rewarded for what you do. You have to have belief in that. You have to have faith in that.
I was just going to say, I believe in that, and I know you do obviously as well. But there's a lot of people that won't, and I think if you don't believe in it, then it's going to make it difficult.
I don't give to receive though. I never ever have any expectation. So when I do all this, and I do other things for other people, and probably a recent example is I had a head of secondary school come to me and say, "Look, we're looking to fund the project for the kids going away on a school trip. Unfortunately, they've come back to me with the cost of living crisis, and they've said it's going to cost £2,500 extra." And I kind of gave him some ideas, and I thought, and he says, "Look, I've really not got the time to do things like that." And I know he wasn't coming to me for it, really. He was just looking for ideas on how to do things, and could I help out in some sort of way? And I just went, "I'll pay the bill. Quite happy to do it." 107 children will now go on their school trip as a result of what I've done. You tell me money doesn't solve problems.
Yeah, I know.
Because of course it does, if you use it for the right thing. So he'll probably announce it later on in the year, more than likely, but I don't expect any advertising. I don't expect anything out of it. I don't expect anybody to go, "Look, Five Properties was fantastic." It's just something I've always wanted to do. It's something I've always been inbred into me. In the very beginning, from my mentors, it's like, once you have to keep giving, and keep giving more. And eventually, it's like the Warren Buffett thing. It's like, he's 99% of Berkshire Hathaway is actually committed to charity.
Mhm.
He's going to give away billions once he goes, but he's giving away billions right now. It's like that's all he ever wanted to do. It was never the money. He walks about his Sears Roebuck grey suit still. You know, he lives in his house that he bought in his childhood when he first married his wife, and Warren Buffett, and he drives about in his old beat up, car.
Yeah,
and he says, "I would be my ideal dream of being happy is like as long as I've got $100,000 a year to live on, I'm fine." Says that's all I want, and that's all he does. The rest is just for giving away to people that and so he likes the journey, and it's what he can do, and it's almost like this typical example of, it's just if you can, you must. He's the epitome of that, really. As if you can, you must. He does it. He builds all this wealth, and he gives it all away. Let's talk about my next property.
Just going to say,
once I got the bug in May 1997, I then started thinking, wait a minute, this works. And then I jumped in.
Just to clarify, at 1997, what point were you at? How many properties did you have? Did you just still have your one, or did you?
Just one.
Right. Okay.
It was just one. As I said, my property journey started maybe 3-4 years before that, but it was a lot of education before then. So I actually purchased my first property in 1987 in May, and that was to prove that model, because I was convinced it worked, but I had to prove it to myself. And there was a count. You know what it is? It's the old expression, and excuse my pun. It's like, shit or get off the toilet. Now is the time. Okay. Nice. Just get on with it. And that's a very crude expression, but it's a perfect example, an analogy of what the situation was. Look, either you go and buy this property, or you forget about this for the rest of your life and move on. Stick to your corporate life. Stick to your plan of being a head of a PLC, being in the paper, being in the media, and being on the television all the time. And that was really where I was going with.
Yeah.
But I did realise that that's not going to set me free. But I still pursued that avenue by choice, because I thought, well, I'm still enjoying it. I'm like the journey. So 189 Taylor Street, that rings a bell, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah? Because you do you manage that?
18. I did for a while. I don't think we've still got it, actually.
So it was actually...
You sold a few years on it.
I bought it in March 1998. This is when repossession territory came in. Now, I got castigated for buying a lot in this street, in Taylor Street. But the reality was, when I started to buy in Taylor Street, there was 20 properties up for sale. 20. Did you imagine that? This was a time, where people did not want to buy these properties, and they were getting repossessed hand over fist. There was 20 properties up for sale at any point in time in that street. And I started to buy them because I thought, these are really good prices. I've now proved the model. These are really good returns. And you know what I said? It's right next to the swimming pool. Well, I don't think it was built at that time. It's right next to where potentially there could be a rail station. See that? Even at that time, I was thinking there's going to be a train station there at some point in time in the future. And you just walk down the hill. You're right.
Because the tracks run along there.
You're right at the high street and everything. And I says, that seems a good investment. So I bought it for the hefty price, because it was a repossession, of £16,604 in 1998. Subsequently, remortgaged, did all the same thing, still the same returns. This was a 2-bedroom now. So a 2-bedroom at that time, you were getting $320 a month for a 2-bedroom rather than the $260. So let's just plug my numbers in this 2-bedroom at $320. So here we are right here. And I bought it for £16,604. Okay. Now I'll do 0.0001 to get this formula to work, because I got the whole lot financed again, and I was effectively earning, I think it was $320 or $340 possible. I'll say $320. But you can see, look at the gross yield, which is a cash buy, 23%. Look at the yield if I leveraged it through the bank. That can't be right, surely.
That can't be.
It's, what is it? 1.7 million % return. It was actually an infinite return, wasn't it? Because I didn't really put anything down again, because the bank says you've got enough lending still with the deposits we've got, so we're happy to let it go at that. But you can see how that came out, about 169% return on the profit every year. Yeah.
Yep.
And then over a 25-year period, because it's still 25 years to today almost, you're earning a 5,000% return. Okay.
Yeah.
But I subsequently sold it in July 2007 for £50,000. Couldn't resist, Richard. I mean, I know I talked about chopping down the tree that bears the fruit, but if you bought it for 16,000 in 98, and then 7, 8, 9 years later, you're able to sell it for 50,000. There was a good turn there. It was like, this was 2007. This was the credit crunch where it was before then, and prices have gone astronomical right up, like God knows what. It was just a huge increase. Now I had remortgaged it at the time to 29,000 to get money back out again. See how I'd done that? So I got 29,000 back out when I bought it for 16 because I was able to put it on the buy-to-let mortgages when they came out. So I was getting interest-only mortgages now. I remortgaged it at 29, and then I'm able to start buying more property with that money. I didn't spend it on myself. I actually bought more property, invested it, reinvested it.
That's what I was going to say. Although you're saying don't cut down the tree that bears the fruit, but you used that money and reinvested it to then further build your portfolio and things.
I had to take the profits, Richard. It was just such a large amount. And we wanted to move out of Taylor Street. Incidentally, we moved into Taylor Street.
Yeah. We
moved into Taylor Street in 1997, just at the same time as I bought 176. I moved from a 3-bedroom semi-detached property at Canarchy into Taylor Street, and everybody took a double take and went, "What? You nuts? You're a financial controller, an accountant. You've got a company car, a brand new, Ford Kia X Mondeo, leather seats, heated seats, and all the rest of it. At that time, it was really top of the range. That was the pinnacle of company cars. And you're going to move into one of the worst areas in Methil. Are you having a laugh? It's like, you're crazy." But at that time, I thought, that's the time, actually, when I was able to start doing this. Because then we were cutting our costs so I could reinvest more in the business, reinvest more in my baby, feed the baby. So we cut all our costs and brought all our costs down, our running costs, because we bought 163 Taylor Street to live in. So I lived in the street I started buying in. Easy to manage. Because anybody had a problem.
It was 163 you were in it.
Just popped over to the house and had a wee chat with me. "Jim, I've got a wee problem with it." "I ain't neighbour, I'll be over there now." Because I learned from Reader's Digest how to do plumbing, how to do kitchen fitting, how to do bathroom fitting, how to do minor electrical.
There was no Google at that time.
No, how to do minor electrical things like changing plugs. I mean, I knew all that from physics and everything. That's why you should stick in at school, by the way. I know all that from physics about how to change plugs and how to change cracked sockets and light switches.
Yeah.
And you were allowed to do that at that time because I was classified as a competent person under the legislation. And it was fine because there was never anybody going hurt anyway. And I knew what I was doing. So I was able to do that with 189 and actually look after it. So the thing I learned about 189 was there's a point where maybe the profit could be reinvested. Also, it was in our names, so we were able to get capital gains allowances. There was indexation allowances at that time as well. So you got really good favourable indexation allowances, which they don't exist today, which was up to 60% off the price of the profit. So I was making 16 versus 50, so you're 34. You were getting 60% off of that first. So 34 was down to about 18,000 off. So you were down to about you were paying capital gains on about maybe 12,000 profit, but you were getting your allowances as well. So there was no capital gains to pay on that, no tax. So this was money we were able to reinvest back in property. That was really important. So that was 189. That's what it probably told me. There is a time sometimes where you want to exit, to reinvest, to make more money, to buy more houses. Now, that I could easily remortgage that, but that wouldn't allow me to buy my house here because we wanted to move out of Taylor Street, and then we took a jump to where we are right now. We took a jump from Taylor Street, which was a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom flat, into a detached 4-bedroom property with its own garage. and with its own garden, and for our family to grow up in a nice wee cul-de-sac. So that was a perfect opportunity to do that. And that's what allowed me to do it. Incidentally, at that same time, Elaine got a redundancy, and we worked that out, and it was like another 17 grand from Diageo. And I was like, this makes absolute sense, Elaine. I could take 17 grand and buy another 3 houses with that, and I could make just as much money as you were earning at Diageo with that return. Oh, and that will allow you to retire. So Elaine was able to retire and actually look after the kids. Tony, first 2 or 3 years was her mum looked after them, but then we allowed Elaine then to look after Tony from 5-year-old and onwards, and then us to have more children. So see how we actually delayed that. It was like I always looked at it, we can't have a family now because we can't afford it. And that's why there was about a 5-year gap between Tony and Ben. Incidentally, no Tony Benn, the socialist politician or anything like that. There was no connection with that, by the way. I was just like Tony and Ben. I got to name Tony, and Elaine got to name Ben, and there was significance there. Tony was named after Tony Basil, the fantastic choreographer. Oh, Mickey, you're so fine. Because I really respected somebody like that, because she was one of the first, a brilliant choreographer at the time, and I had done a lot of research into her. It was nothing to do with the music, but the fact that who she was. And I love the name Tony with the I. My mother could not come to terms with a boy's name on a girl at that, in 93. And then Ben was after the song Ben from Michael Jackson about his pet rat. But
Scott, where did Scott?
Scott was actually from Scotland, because there was Highland music playing at the time. We couldn't decide what his name was, so Scott was actually from Scotland because of the Highland music playing at the background when they in the maternity ward. That was it, and I felt Scott was the right one. So that's where Scott's name came from, by the way. So you could see 189 being a really good return as well in terms of that, and then I went on to buy in March. So see that March 98. And then March 98 again, we had lined up 39 Durward Street and leaving. Bought that for £13,800. 804. Got to remember the £4. Again through the bank. They gave me a facility, by the way, because I started to prove a model here. So they actually said, I'll give you 100,000 up to, and you can just crack on. And that's when I started to buy all the properties which were in really, they were decent areas. They needed a bit of TLC. This was a bit of rundown property, but it was in a really good area because we used to live in Durward Street. It was right across the road from where we were, and it was a 1-bedroom flat, so it was pretty antiquated. So again, I did all the decoration. I put all the carpets down. I did all the kitchen as well. I didn't really put a new kitchen in, but we had electric heating at that time as well. So we renewed all the storage heaters rather than old brown duplex heaters. We put proper up-to-date duplex heaters, storage heaters on, and we found a tenant no bother for that property as well. And again, that was at the 260 a month, but we're buying for 13,800. I'm doing all the work myself, therefore increasing the value of the property, but I'm actually building it into it in the equity. So there's no surprise when it came round to when buy-to-let mortgages came in, I was able to walk away from the bank again. It was the same figures as before, by the way, as 176. So you're talking infinite returns again, and infinite money is coming in when you look at it like that. And then I was able to do on a 32,000 mortgage through the Mortgage Works, or it was GMAC Residential at that time. So General Motors had actually done a finance arm in America, and they decided to move into that and buy what we call now subprime mortgages, packaged up. This was the rise of the buy-to-let industry and how they all wanted to jump on this bandwagon to get finance and get into the finance industry. So again, the lessons at 13 Durward Street taught me. What did it tell me? You can add value to any single property, and it really doesn't matter as long as there's demand for the area. And I bought it primarily. I never really wanted to buy 1-bedroom properties, but it has the capacity to extend up into the attic and make it into a 3-bedroom if you wanted it to. And that's why I felt that it was a good one to buy for that reason. Because I always thought in order to exit a market, there's less a market for a 1-bedroom than there is for a 2-bedroom if you exit.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've got potential to extend upstairs, then there's a good added value there and a prospect if you need to exit that market. So see how is de-risking it.
So you've got that exit strategy if you need it.
Yeah, and that was probably the first time I actually came across a difficult tenant in order to actually get them out. Because there was eventually one guy, I can't remember his name, anyway, who actually didn't want to leave, but he wasn't paying his rent, and he was quite difficult to actually manage and handle because he just did his own thing. You know, if he couldn't get into the house through the door because he'd lost his key, he would smash the wee window at the side in order to get in.
Yeah.
And it's like, thanks very much. Who's going to repair that? So it became a bit problematic, and eventually I just went through the process of, you know, starting to recover the property back. Now, this is when I started to learn. It's like, even though you go through the proper process of getting it back, that someone will maybe move out anyway, regardless, and you wouldn't need to go through the court to do it, because they know, you know, they've got some sense and some morality in the fact that they know they're not paying the rent, so it's time to go.
Yeah.
So, you know, he left of his own accord. That's fine. And I got it back into shape again. But again, I couldn't resist taking the profits. You know, 48,000 I got for it in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
So why would you know? I mean, bought it for 13, got it for 48, able to pay back the mortgage, but I was able to release some equity as well and actually make money out of it as well and reinvest. And again, that was another one that I was able to get, you know, good tax allowances on, because again, we had the capital gains allowances in terms of how they're going. Now,
again, it's another example of the time was right to cash in on that one for those reasons. In order, obviously, in order to
I would never say to myself, I wish I hadn't done it,
mm-hmm.
because you're chopping down the tree that bears the fruit. But I think if I was going to say to anybody now, before you sell, really consider the long-term consequences.
Yeah.
Because I am where I am, and that's fine. And that's the journey I've taken, and I'm happy where I am. So I don't think I would ever have changed it. But if I'd known a bit more at the time, maybe I wouldn't have sold them. But I'm not really bored about where I am or regret it. I didn't, because it was the right decision at that time. See the difference between the right and the wrong. You know, people go back and say, oh, it was the wrong decision. No, it was the right decision at that time.
At the time, yeah.
Because you are where you are because of that. That's the most important thing. So that was 39 Durbar Street in March 98. It sold for that. Now, for the people on Instagram and the people on TikTok, we're fine. We could finish off there. No, we don't need to finish off. We'll go on a wee bit. We'll go on a wee bit more, by the way. So hang in there, because we're going to talk about one more property. But for the people on Instagram, this will finish right now because we'll have to cut it off somewhere. So 58 minutes is the cutoff, because you're only allowed to upload a video on Instagram if it's less than an hour. So we're streaming live on Instagram, so that's fine, and that will be posted, and you will see that. But for the purpose of the upload, that's where we'll be finishing. If you do want to see any more of the journey, then just go into 5 Properties TV on YouTube, and you'll actually get the journey coming on from here to the next property, and then we'll finish
YouTube's
off.
the best. YouTube's the best because it's got the whole playlist. Yeah.
So that's that one. So that's when I learned how to deal with difficult tenants. I did literally on the day. He said, "Well, I think I shouldn't necessarily need to go," and I went, "Well, you're not paying your rent. I think it is time to go."
Yeah.
And that's when he went, "Yeah, okay, I suppose it is." And that's it, because I'd invested so much in him. And I'd actually tried to help him loads and loads of times. There was times where he just wouldn't respond back to the local authority because he was getting help with his rent, and he just wouldn't respond back to them, and they were stopping his rent all the time. So it became an administration nightmare for me, because then that's when I had to start formulating a way, because, you know, they are people like this more likely are in receipt of benefits because of the way they think. There's no doubt about that. They just need help and support over that period of time until they get that way of thinking out of that, and they get back on track. But for some people, they're inherent. That's the way they think all the time. So they're almost there for life, and a benefit trap in their mind and how they think. And this was one of these guys. And I thought, I'm going to have to work on a way in order to help this person. But the local authority, this is the lesson that this one told me. The local authority says, look, we can't help you because we can't talk to you because you don't have any authority. And I thought, okay, and this is where the data protection exemption came from, the statement.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All these years ago, I then formulated a one-page letter which allowed the tenant to their name, their address. I give Jim Parker of Parker Housing permission to actually deal on my. Now, I mean, I was very specific about this. I didn't want to know everything about this person because I think that's crossing the line. Deal on behalf of me with any of my benefit claimant for housing benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to then phone up housing benefit because I had that data protection exemption in. It therefore allowed me to deal with him on his behalf. You know how the local authority deals with him sometimes on their behalf. Well, it allowed me to deal with him on their behalf. Therefore, I was able to sort out all their problems and all their issues. So I didn't wait for them to try and sort it out because it would never happen. And it would leave us in a vulnerable situation. So I then got all their stuff back on track. And it was like, okay, what do I need to know in order to help him? And they would used to say, well, we need proof of this, we need proof of that, we need proof of that. Okay, great stuff. I'll get all that for you then. So I would then meet the tenant, I would then sit down with him and I'd go through it and I'd qualify all it for him to make sure he was in a position where I got all the right information for him in order to get his claim back on track so I could get paid and he could continue to stay in his property. In this instance, it got to the point where it was just ridiculous. But it did teach me that property in that way to get this exemption statement so I could still deal on their behalf. Now, that can be done still today, by the way.
Yeah, that's still
because all you are is a person helping him or helping that or her to get to the next steps because they don't know what to do. It's like most people don't know what to do when filling out an application online. It's like we're there. I was there to help through the process, and that's what I'd say to you guys. It's like just go around and sort it out with them. Just sit down with them and go through all what they need to do, and then get that in and speak to the people about what they need, and then put that in on their behalf. Get them help, get them support. There's a lot of agencies out there now, like Trust.
There is now. I was just going to say that, but I've still got your original statements and things, and they can be used if needed.
We deal with Trust and Fife, don't we? And we deal with other agencies in order to help them through that process. So these agencies rose as a result of people like me saying to them, we need help. We need these people to get help. And this is why the agencies now exist. Key Fund, Trust and Fife, Homes for Good. All these different agencies popped up as a result of what I had experienced over the years and me telling them what they needed to know. So see how I'm making sure everything works and everybody's playing a part in that process and not actually just saying to the person, well, go and you sort it out or you'll lose your house.
Yeah.
I never wanted anybody to lose their house. I wanted them to keep a roof over their head and I wanted them to stay safe and secure because I always had this premonition in my mind of going back to the slum landlords that you used to see on the television, like the Rachmans and the Van Hoosenfelds that, for want of a better phrase, didn't give a shit about their tenants.
Yeah.
And they couldn't care less. And it's like, if they didn't pay the rent, it was like, well, let's just grab your stuff and I'll grab you by the collar and I'll grab you by the bum and I'll just throw you out the door. And for me, that was unforgivable, doing things like that. And I was never wanting to be that type of person. So this is why I put that in place in order to sort that issue out. So that's what 39 Durward.
39 Durward, yeah.
Yeah. And then again, April 98. See that? March 98, April 98.
Yeah.
I was getting carried away then. It was like, I now prove the formula. Here we go again. Den Walk in Buckhaven. Bought for £16,493. Again, I was able to get, it was a 1-bedroom upper flat. See the pattern? Able to convert. I looked at the attic. You can convert this to a 2-bed or a 3-bed possibly. So I didn't want to do that, but it was just 1 bedroom at the time. I was able to get a tenant for it. And again, another problematic tenant. Tony, if you're out there, you were a total nightmare sometimes. But he was a great guy. I mean, Tony, unfortunately, it was very difficult to manage Tony. Tony had an abusive relationship with himself in terms of drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
I worked with Key Fund in order to bond them. So this was a bonding system at the time, which had actually developed. We had developed, and I helped set that up as well in the beginning. And they were able to put a deposit down or a guarantee. See how long ago that was, 1998.
Yeah.
When you think about how long that's been going. So I remember it was Dawn Brunton. Hello, Dawn, if you're watching. Gary's wife. So Dawn actually helped set up this bond in place. We moved Tony in. Tony looked after himself. It was a coal fireplace. I got a coal bunker outside for him. At that time, it worked perfectly well because it was a proper central heating system. You know, the coal back boiler one, where you just flipped and it did all the radiators. So it was central heating, but it was powered by coal because that was the thing at that time. And your hot water was in a tank behind the fire.
The wall in the fire. Yeah.
And then the kitchen was really nice. And I'm sure, yes, I did put a new kitchen in there. And I think I put a shower over the bath. I was a big fan of putting showers over the bath, electric showers, because I always believed, this was the one that taught me this, I always believed with electric showers, if the heating goes down, they've got hot water. Yeah, always. And that was the key. That was the key point for housing. And it's probably part of the Standard Repairing Act now, which is instrumental in legislation, which is actually you have to make sure as a landlord that your tenant always has hot running water.
Yeah.
And that's why I always put the electric showers over the bath, regardless of what type of heating system there was. You know, people say it's like, over the heating system, they've got an immersion on their tank. It's like, no. I always put an electric shower over just in case, because you never know what's going to happen, and they've always got that. And funny enough, in the past, people would come to me and say, oh, my heating's down. It's like, I've got no hot water for the sink. And my first response was, you got a bucket? Aye. Well, go and put the bucket under the shower and actually fill the hot water from the shower into the bucket. Oh, I can't. That's what. Well, there you've got hot water, haven't you? So it was always a temporary resolve, wasn't it?
Always a temporary measure, yeah.
But it's amazing the amount of people that couldn't think of that at the time. So that's why I did that system where I always had hot water, running water in the property to make sure that they were always looked after and they always had washing facilities. So that's what then Walk taught me, which I bought, and then subsequently I sold it. 2006, couldn't resist. 16,500 bought it and sold it for 44,000. But again, I got a mortgage for 25,000 because I got a buy-to-let mortgage and released the money. See, at that time, you couldn't get buy-to-let mortgages if it was under 25,000 because it came under the Consumer Credit Act. Anything under 25,000 in finance was under Consumer Credit Act, so therefore they couldn't do buy-to-let mortgages below that. Hence the reason how my mortgages had to be when they worked out. They had to be over 25,000 when I got them remortgaged. Right. That's why I could only go to a bank in the beginning, because even then the buy-to-let lenders always used to say to me, "But the value of your house is too low. We can't actually mortgage it on our product." And I'm like, okay, this makes no sense at all. From a commercial point of view or a finance point of view, you can get £300 for a 2-bedroom flat that you bought for 15,000, but you can't mortgage, or you can get £300 for a 2-bedroom flat you bought for 50,000, because that's all you were getting at the same time when you bought for 50.
Yeah,
but you can't mortgage. Why on earth would I want to buy something at 50 grand if I can buy one for 15, tart it up, and make it really nice inside, and actually rent it for the same value?
You can get the same, yeah.
That made no sense to me. Other people were doing that, whereas I wasn't. I was like, no, I'll go through the bank lending. I'll do but the great thing is, because the rise in interest, the rise in property prices up to 2006, that allowed me to come away from the bank of the capital repayment model and actually go to interest-only model with GMARC residential. And that allowed me to get 25,000 out, which was all the money. Well, I never had any money in the first place. It just gave me more money to go and buy more property and put deposits down. So that was a really good bonus as well. But again, it allowed me to buy the existing house I'm in right now. If it wasn't for this, I would never have the money to buy the existing house I'm in right now.
I was just going to say, because as you've went through each property, it's quite good to hear how you've learned something from each property and how you developed your skills on how to manage and look after your portfolio. But at the same time, knowing the right time to obviously maybe sell the property, use that money to reinvest, and then build that momentum with building your portfolio as you go. And that facilitates you how to do that.
I'm getting up on TikTok. Who you talking to? I'm talking to Richard for the people on TikTok. Richard, what's your handle on TikTok?
It's 5 Properties Lettings.
5 Properties Let's. Go onto TikTok and actually follow Richard on 5 Properties Let's.
Lettings. 5
Or
Properties Lettings.
And that way, you'll get Richard up to 1,000 and you'll start to see him on TikTok on the same channel as me in the future. So it's Richard I'm talking to, but unfortunately he can't appear on the screen on TikTok because he needs 1,000 followers.
I'm at 734 followers.
So I can invite him on. So if you can do that, that would be absolutely fantastic.
That would be great.
That is Yander Sequence. Thank you very much for that comment. Thanks. No message on Instagram. You've got your golden opportunity on Instagram to ask me, actually, when I'm going live. So if I'll go live every single week on the Wealth Creation Show on TikTok and Instagram live as well as the social media channels and YouTube and Twitter and everything else. So you do have an opportunity to ask me any questions at that time. Richard, have you got anything else to ask me? Because we could maybe just finish off there.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to finish because I think we've got to that point in your journey where you're starting to build that momentum and reinvesting and building the portfolio. And I think obviously that'll bring us to your next stage quite comfortably for the next show.
Next week. Wait till you find out the pig in the poke. This is it. The next property is like, oh my God, why did I buy this property? Why did I buy this property? That's the one next week we're going to start off with.
Right, okay.
And the lessons I've learned, a huge amount of lessons from this property. But I was on a roll and I thought I was king of the hill. And this is what showed me due diligence.
Yeah.
And I'll talk
about another lesson that will be quite important for people to listen to.
A big lesson, a big financial lesson as well. Yeah. Probably one of the ones I actually got caught out with. I'm going to talk about first thing next week.
Brilliant. I've got obviously I read out the comment for Dave earlier. I've got Davey Muir as well here. Davey's asking a question, but I'll come back to you one on that. Davey's asking some advice, Jim, about buy-to-let and investment. But we'll come to you, David. But thanks for watching and jumping in with your question. But yeah, if you're happy, we'll finish there for this week, Jim. And I'm sure everybody will be excited to hear the next stage of the journey and obviously learn from another one of your mistakes as you've went through.
Listen, the key here is and again I'll go back to my learning from my mentors, and it's like you either can experience, you can learn from wisdom or you can learn from experience.
Yeah.
Now, wisdom and experience is a difference here. What do they mean? I mean, why is that? Well, the analogy I was used, and I think I used it last night on another show. You're standing at the side of a track on track and field, and you've got somebody that's wanting to jump a hurdle, a hurdler. Now, you're wanting to learn to jump hurdles. Now, there's two things you can do. You could do it yourself. So you could try and jump a hurdle yourself and learn to jump hurdles. Now, learning to jump hurdles is a fine art. You have to have a good technique. You have to work out that technique. You have to get the right takeoff, or you'll catch the hurdle, you'll fall over, and you'll skin your knees several times, and you'll probably bump your head a couple of times as well. Now, that's pretty costly in terms of your time, in terms of your body, and how you do it. Now, that is called experience.
Yep.
There's the other one here, is you find somebody far better than you at jumping hurdles, and you sit at the side of the field, and you actually watch them jump the hurdles, and you analyze their technique. You record them, and you watch them and how they take off, and you then start to try and mimic what they are doing. You're not going to do it 100% perfectly, and so that's going to be a lot quicker to do it, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's going to be less heartache. It's going to be less skin in your knees and hitting your head, and that is called wisdom.
Yeah.
And in hindsight now, I would say to most people, you're better to learn from wisdom rather than experience, because experience is pretty costly and it takes you a longer time to get there. But the proviso on this in learning from wisdom is you make damn sure you don't get a furu.
Yeah.
And I mean
learn for the correct people's wisdom.
Yeah. Make sure you don't get a furu, which is a fake guru. Because these people just want to sell courses. They don't really have the knowledge. They're only one step ahead of you, possibly. Or they're maybe teaching something they've learned from a book, but they don't actually have any wealth at all. But it looks, by the smoke and mirrors, on the things that you see on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, and they're doing very well for themselves. And they possibly talk a good game, but the reality is they're copying it from someone else.
Yeah.
So they're only one step ahead of you. Is that the right person to learn from? I'm not particularly sure. If it's for free and they're one step ahead of you, then possibly yes, the answer to that is. Because you're learning the step that they need to do. So there's a lot of information that I learned in the very beginning, which was actually free information. Because I used to go to a lot of free seminars, you know, the free one-day workshops, where they were trying to do the upsell. Well, my first one was Russ Whitney, which is actually the property academy or something like that. It's not the property academy as in the state agency, it's the property academy or property workshop or property professionals. It's changed that many times because it's went out of business that many times as a training company. But somebody else has bought the assets over, or the database, and they've actually built it as well, and then they sell the courses. But Russ Whitney was a great one. And I'll talk about Russ Whitney. I'll put a note there next week about what the first thing I learned from there. Russ Whitney. And I'll talk about that next week. I've got remind me about that next week, Richard, about what I learned from the free course at Russ Whitney. It then set me up to that meteoric rise of, oh my God, it's like I've got all these properties to buy now, and all these people are coming to me. I can't believe it. How do you attract people to you? There's loads and loads of courses out there for people to do that, and they're, every man their dog's a property sourcer now, isn't there? It's like, because they're teaching every single time. It's like, if you've got no money to get started, become a property sourcer. But there's only so many sourcing properties that you can get, and there's only so many people that can actually make a full-time income as a property sourcer. So if I was a property sourcer today to get myself started, I would actually be working my full-time job and being a property sourcer at the same time on it as a side hustle, because you're still getting a full income of what you're doing. Don't give up your job. Very few people actually make full-time out of there. That's the lesson I would learn. Don't give up your job. Keep the job that you like, even though you don't like it. You're going to only have it for about 5, maybe 8, 10 years at the very most, and then you'll be financially free. So grind it out, take it on the chin, and just stick with your job right now. There's a few things that are the most stressful in this sort of society today. The most stressful things. Again, my mentors taught me this: getting a new job, moving home, having children, getting married, and divorce. Avoid these at all costs, because these are the things that suck up all your time and take you away from the baby and feeding the baby, and it'll cost you an absolute fortune over time. So avoid doing these people. Anybody that says to me, "Oh, I just hate my job," it's like, I need to change it. And I'm thinking, you could be out of this in 5 years. You realize that? And they don't have enough faith in themselves to think and realize and have faith and belief they can be out in 5 years. I know they can, because I've done it in 8. But they could be out in 5 easily, even probably quicker. But they think that they should be giving up their job straight away, which they lose their income, and then they're on skid row. They can't reinvest in their business or even support themselves. Or they think that they should be changing jobs, because if I change jobs, it's all going to be different for me. Guess what? It's out the frying pan into the fire. Is that right, Richard?
Yeah.
It is out the frying pan into the fire, isn't it? I've changed that many jobs over the years to help other people, but it really is out the frying pan into the fire. If you've understood my journey from before, you're trading one for the another in terms of, somebody that's just going to control what you're doing. So just grind it out where you are right now, and then you have plenty of choices to make later on once you retire, because you've still got a steady income coming in. So do a side hustle on property sourcing. Make 1,000 here and there, 2,000 or 3,000 every here and there. You still got your full-time job supplying you. All your side hustle money then goes into your baby to actually grow your baby. Whereas if you give up your job and you try to do that, then
you're going to be using that money to live
first. You've got to replace your income first. That makes no sense at all. But there's so many people out there that teach that as a strategy. It's like, you're off your bloody head. Don't. Stick to what you do right now. It's a steady job. It keeps you going. It's not going to be forever. Grind it out, suck it up, buttercup, and move on. That's it for this lesson, I suppose.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's a good place to end then. But yeah, thanks for that today, Jim. I am looking forward to the next session. I hope you can all join us, and we will continue on that journey with you.
I had to contact my accountant actually to think, what did I do there and what did I do here?
Just to make sure
I've lost half of the properties I actually did in the transactions. I thought, I remember having this one and that one. I can't find any trace of it. So anyway, sorry, Richard.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I was just closing up for the day. So thanks, Jim, and thanks everybody for joining. And we'll see you on the next instalment.